Okay, let's start with what I call the world stage. The world stage is the consensus version of reality that we all share, that we all internalize. While there's a lot of internal diversity of opinion and perspectives, there's broad points of agreement that keep everyone within the same paradigm. Like for everyone in the world right now, it's the third week of January, and certain major events are ubiquitously understood to have happened. We all agree on the basic stuff. And what you don't see, because there's so much internal diversity of thought and opinion, you don't see what is excluded or marginalized if it's not acknowledged. You see plenty of stuff that is openly opposed and censored, like conspiracy theories and alternative media, but you don't really see what is not acknowledged by the establishment media or even the anti-establishment posers in alternative media. And what I refer to here is media fakery and the role that it plays in our worldview. So let's start with, what is your point of view? If your point of view on the news events comports with what ChatGPT or Wikipedia says, then your worldview is within the world stage paradigm. And what separates the world stage paradigm from what I term the off-world stage perspective is that the off-world stage perspective is inclusive of the special effects media fakery and the role of entertainment in reinforcing the ongoing staged events. Moreover, we examine from this perspective the significance of the fake events, short-term and long-term, and how they persist and they become permanent fixtures in our consensus worldview. So again, the world stage is just the dominant paradigm. I refer to this as mainstream mediation. And by mediation, I refer to all platforms, all propaganda vectors, not just news media, but also entertainment, influencers, politics, religion, you name it. If it reaches the masses, it's a conduit. It's compromised for this purpose. And all the viewpoints expressed by whatever platform it is will conform to the dominant worldview, the world stage. Now, the world stage is the internalized version of events as augmented by mainstream sources. So whatever they add on to the timeline. So now, what is your point of view? Well, your point of view, if it's not mainstream, it's likely alternative media. The problem with alternative media is that it exists as a subset of the mainstream. Alt media, and you can name any big influencer, conspiracy theorist, independent journalist, none of them look at scripted fake events, news bending, which is how the fake events influence news cycles, and then the subsequent and long-term effects of history bending. Nor do they look at or take seriously predictive programming, which is real. And a lot of people are still resisting this fact, but in 2022, we really nailed down what we call concurrent programming, which can't be so easily dismissed. And as you'll see how it plays out on the timeline, these are important facets. Because what we're talking about is a world view that is imposed by a merging of news, entertainment, politics, and again, every other possible propaganda vector to create a monolithic perspective. And we get ubiquitous, real synchronized responses to events on the world stage. So now let's go on. So the MSM plus refers to the alternative media. Alternative media, it needs to be understood, is still establishment. All of this, if it's big, reaching mass audiences, if it's big media, if it's dominating the alternative media space, you can't consider it to be anti-establishment. like Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, are they really anti-establishment? No, it's a posture. You could just call them controlled op, but no, they're not really anti. It's just a posture. So you have pro, which is left with regard to media, and the right is largely anti. And these are just reflexive positions. So the pro and the anti are part of a duopoly. And the reason why there is a pro and an anti is that they are being triangulated against. These two demographics are being triangulated by a singular source. But alternative media is not outside of the box. They will never arrive at the right answers. These are state-approved opinions. They don't challenge the dominant paradigm. And you know that you're in this MSM plus box if you don't trust the mainstream, but you do trust alternative explanations to the same stories. So what you have here is just additional information for them to find it palatable. So the mainstream says Charlie Kirk was killed by an angry liberal. Well, alternative media says no, he was killed by Erica Kirk working with the deep state. Well, they added on elements to make it make sense for them. And this is with every single issue. They add on a few more details. Mainstream says radical Islam inspired terrorism and they took down the Twin Towers. Conspiracy theorists will say, no, Israel did it, posing as Muslims or financing it in order to get America to go to war. So they add a bunch of stuff without subtracting from the essential premise. So some of us are asking, is Charlie Kirk even dead? We subtract the starting point that he got killed just because we saw it on the TV. We subtract the built-in assumptions that are made within this world stage. So our perspective I refer to as MSM minus. So there's only really, if you think about it, 3 perspectives to have here. There's the mainstream, there's the MSM plus, which is additional information, and then there's the off-world stage perspective that is the one that is inclusive of news bending, media fakery, and the programming and how ubiquitous it is. So now let's go to the next whiteboard and I'll explain how I believe, how I observe this to actually play out in real life. So this bottom line, the black line, past, present, future, this is our timeline. This is what we can test. This is what we experience. The present is where the world stage exists. The world stage paradigm is portrayed to us every day through the news. What happens to news? The day after, the week after, the month after, it becomes history. As it goes into the past, it consolidates its history. And one of the things that we are observing here is how the fake events, represented by the blue line, never get subtracted from the worldview. If they go in the news, even if we call them fake, even if no one believes it, except for the mainstream audiences, it's going into the history books. History is an accumulation of news, largely modified news, fake news, staged events. So you'll see that the blue line, which represents fake, actually starts in the future, and it's separate from real. Here it's just a script to be implemented. In the present, these fake events are inserted into our timeline through psyops, staged or simulated versions of the thing are portrayed as real, whatever it is, terrorist attack, mass shooting, assassination. So it's theater. So these visual lies, these stories, these productions are perceived by those within the world stage as real. So they merge the fake and the real. The script gets implemented in the form of news. Timelines are merged in the minds of the perceivers. And in the past, you'll see the timelines have been effectively merged in what we call history. So history is proactively manufactured. Many of the fake events, the scripts to be implemented, are planned 10, 20, 30 years or longer into the future. And they are merged in the present by the consumers of the world stage paradigm. They see it, they believe it. These two timelines are merged, And the two timelines blended together creates what Baudrillard called hyperreality. And hyperreality is when real and fake have been so successfully blended together that you cannot really delineate between the two. So if you live in a world where, for example, and it's not just the mainstream that brings you fake events and augmentations to your reality, it's also the alternative. So let's say you believe in chemtrails. Well, that's an alternative fake belief. You believe in climate change. It's a mainstream fake belief. Well, in both these instances, now you have what are called hyperstitions. Climate change, chemtrails, scary 5G towers, bowl cut mass school shooters. These are things that exist in the realm of psyops, in fake news, but they become merged with reality. They're made real through the magic of the Black Mirror. So if you are looking at things from that perspective, if you're within the world stage paradigm, you live in a world of mass shooters, climate change, or chemtrails, take your pick. You're probably scared of 5G towers if you're a conspiracy theorist. If you're not a conspiracy theorist, you're scared of Elon Musk. If you are a conspiracy theorist, you're afraid of Bill Gates. But you have all these personages, these characters and fake events that augment your reality. And the perspective from the off-world stage recognizes the fake events and subtracts them. That's why I call it MSM minus. We are informed disbelievers when it comes to the products of the psychological operations. We know why we don't believe these things. So we do not suffer from the confusion of real merged with fake, but we recognize the two timelines. I've been referring to this as the parallel media because we're not anti, but we're keeping a parallel record to the merged timelines where we are separating the two. And this blue line, the fake events, they all exist in the same fictional universe. And I refer to that as the meta script. It is a script for fake events that will be portrayed through multiple propaganda vectors. And then what's more, when it comes to these events, they are supplanted by predictive programming. So when we see something happen on the news, let's say, just to refer back to the CK shooting, Charlie Kirk, that event was a scripted event, planned from the future, merged with our real-time news cycle as we're living through it before it becomes history. But at the same time, the media environment includes not just news, but also entertainment. So let's say you're watching a new show on Hulu, like The Tempest, on September 10th. Well, if you were watching that show on September 10th, #1 show in Japan, Taiwan, Turkey, and a few other places, big movie, it is filmed in South Korea, spy thriller. Charlie Kirk had been there 4 days before the September the 10th. It's about a Republican leader of the Youth Republicans who gets shot in the neck in a church in front of his audience, and that came out the same day Charlie Kirk was shot. The series is actually about the widow of the slain leader and how she takes over his organization. And over the course of several episodes, she's accused of being behind the assassination. She's accused of faking her grief on TV. But what we had here, and this is one of many, an example of something in the media ecosystem that's targeting mass audiences that perfectly mirrors real time what is happening on the world stage, even predicting the path of the widow. We would call this concurrent programming. But then when we look at the scene closely, we can see that in addition to what was in the media ecosystem that day, there was stuff going back in the past to 1998 with Snake Eyes. And there were other things in between. There were more movies released at the same time. So you had predictive programming where the event was foreshadowed. And there's a reason why they do this in literature. There's a reason why they do it in the metascript. And what is history but a compilation of stories? And these stories are built up over time. They create characters, archetypes in the imagination, and present them on the world stage. But then, following the predictive programming, the real-time event, and the concurrent programming, it's talked about endlessly in the future. And every time it's brought up, it's reinforced. And every single conversation is going to reinforce the essential reality of the thing. Oh, he died because of this. He was killed because of that. They never say, oh, wait, he's actually alive. They never correct their interpretation. They never take into account the existence of psyops, media fakery, staged events, and how pervasive it is, and how systemic it is. And it is systemic fakery. So there's plenty of real news, real events, real stuff happening, but the fake stuff is superimposed over it. And it may not even have to be the dominant majority of the news. It can be a small fraction of the news. We'll say 2% of the news is completely staged events. Well, these are the events that get all the attention. They take up the spotlight, take up all the oxygen, and they dominate the news cycle, and everything bounces off of it, and then the reinforcement programming continues to drive it in as real. So the fake actually dominates the real. Now there's the mainstream and the alternative camps, but there is no platform on the world stage for media deconstruction. And when you're looking at it from the off-world stage perspective, every single news cycle in the present is analyzed with a full appreciation of what came before. The fact that we have these merged timelines to account for. And what we do by separating these, by maintaining the division, is we don't forget that we're dealing with systemic fakery and liars who lie as a standard operating procedure. So we don't have the naivety that accompanies not just mainstream, but a lot of alternative thought. A lot of alternative conspiracy people will say, well, maybe it is real this time. Maybe this event isn't fake. Not everything's fake, guys. It's like, well, we're not the ones saying everything's fake. I'm saying 2%. It doesn't have to be everything. You're saying everything is real until proven fake. I'm saying fake until proven real. And we've been saying this for some time. Consider now when I say fake until proven real, it's not everything. It's that which you cannot reality test, because it's something that's out of your area. It's national news. But the things that distinguish real from fake are what we call hoax indicators. And there are plenty of those. There are giveaways. One of them being the existence of predictive programming, concurrent programming. Those are giveaways you're looking at something fake, but also concurrent drills. Not to mention every other deviation from standard protocol with all the fake events that we look at. And looking at it from the off-world stage perspective, we're able to look at what's in the media ecosystem in the recent past or in the present, and from that we can ascertain what's on the script, what's about to occur. We were fully anticipating the Trump head wound. You can look back at our channel, look at my Substacks. Back in April, we were talking about fallout and how it was predicting a Trump head wound, blood on the right side of the head. We were looking at Atlantic, the magazine, and its depictions of Trump with the head wound. We were expecting it. And why is that? Well, because we have a predictive model, and we know that the predictive programming is part of the saturation of the world stage, of the simulation that you internalize. They completely saturate it and give you suggestions. So you're suggestible, manipulatable, and so when they fake the thing, it seems inevitable, like it was going to happen. And we have many examples of this where maybe the public doesn't know who Charlie Kirk was. But if they saw South Park, they did. And if you watch South Park closely, they mimic his death, even having him fall off his chair to the left. And this is routine. We actually predict it. We predict the predictive programming with consistency, because it is a consistent facet. It's systemic fakery. The news and entertainment are entrained. They're synchronized. And this tells you a lot. The real-time concurrent programming synchronization of the fake and the real of the entertainment and the news, and they present it to us in the real world. The synchronization is there to, I think, tell the story, pre-sell the story, make you suggestible to it. But it's also a giveaway, because you cannot have a spontaneous fake event attended by some Netflix version of the same thing. Once, twice, three times. You can only call it an eerie coincidence so many times, but now it's to the point where we see some questionable event. Like last year, we were talking about the Louvre and the stolen crown jewels. And I said, well, if it's fake, there's going to be some indicators. Like, wow, it's blasted everywhere. Everyone's hearing about this dumb story. But then there's also, wait, this was during the No Kings protest. No Kings, crown jewel stolen. Then on Netflix, a show called Lupin, main character was stealing the necklace of Marie Antoinette from the Louvre. And this was noted by Inside Edition, that the real event was mirrored on Netflix. But what's more, the theme. Marie Antoinette lost her head during a No Kings protest. Donald Trump on that day was represented as Marie Antoinette on the Drudge Report, an image that I think was shared by Governor Newsom. So No Kings, Marie Antoinette / Trump, No Kings protest ties into that, and then the stolen crown jewels and a Netflix. I mean, it's accompanied by a real robbery. I mean, that real robbery is likely then fake. You could surmise it's fake just based upon the echo chamber that they create with every one of these events. We're examining this. This is empirical research, but we're examining these things very closely, and they do fit a pattern. And as we elucidate these patterns, we get better at predicting things by looking at these trends. And one of the recent ones I analyzed was the concurrence of Renee Good and Wicked for Good, and how the movie reinforces the story of a woman rising up against the ICE agents, and then of course martyring herself for the greater good. You're talking about mainstream released movie, and the subtext, the animals being prohibited from talking, being disappeared, the Munchkins not allowed to ride on the train, the Wizard of Oz as Donald Trump, it all comports. But the timing of its release is what I'm pointing out here, is that how could you have a movie obviously scheduled a long time in advance that perfectly corresponds with the psyop of the time? And this is a very significant operation. Well, you could pretty much, again, surmise here that event was staged, especially when you look at how closely these stories overlap. So the same audiences are targeted. The people who like the Wicked series are also going to identify with the anti-ICE very closely. And there are other elements having to do with identity politics that they fuse into these movies. And we get into these things in detail. But again, the future is scripted with fake events to be implemented over the real that dominate the conversation, creating a uniform worldview. We experience these fake events as real through the news, and then they become our history as these two timelines merge. And on the world stage, whether you're mainstream or alternative, you're not looking at these as two separate timelines, but you're confused. You see them as merged. The only unconfused are those who are outside, who have the off-world stage perspective. We are the unconfused.